The Middle East is once again teetering on the edge of a major conflict, its cities and borders gripped by uncertainty and fear. Tensions that have simmered for years are now boiling over, threatening to engulf not just the region, but the entire world in a new and unpredictable crisis. The escalation is drawing in global powers, forcing urgent meetings among world leaders and raising fears of a wider war that could reshape international alliances and security for years to come. In recent weeks, the standoff between Israel and Iran has reached a dangerous new phase. What was once a shadowy conflict of covert operations and cyber attacks has erupted into open military confrontation, with missile strikes and air raids shaking cities and leaving destruction in their wake. Around the globe, people watch anxiously as airstrikes and threats of retaliation dominate headlines. The specter of escalation looms large, with the potential for devastating consequences that could ripple far beyond the region's borders, impacting economies, energy supplies, and global stability. Amidst this chaos, a new and troubling rumor has emerged, one that could change the entire balance of power. Reports suggest that China may be secretly supplying weapons to Iran, even as it publicly calls for restraint and peace. This allegation has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles and intelligence agencies worldwide. If these claims are true, it would mark a dramatic shift in China's foreign policy, signaling a willingness to take sides in a conflict that could pit superpowers directly against each other. The risk of a direct confrontation between the United States and China has never felt more real. But how much truth is there to these explosive allegations? Are they grounded in fact, or are they simply another layer of confusion and misinformation in an already volatile situation? With so many competing narratives, it's hard to know what to believe. In this video, we'll break down the facts, examining the recent attacks, the official responses from governments and international organizations, and the broader context that has brought us to this critical moment. We'll also investigate the real story behind China's alleged involvement, looking at the evidence, the denials, and the possible motivations behind these claims. Our goal is simple: to separate fact from fiction, cut through the noise, and help you understand what's really at stake in this critical global flashpoint, because the decisions made here could shape the future for us all. A current crisis is the violent culmination of years of clandestine conflict between Israel and Iran. For decades, both nations have waged a shadow war, marked by cyber attacks, assassinations, sabotage, and proxy battles across the Middle East. These covert operations, often denied in public, have shaped the region's security landscape and fueled deep mistrust between the two rivals. On June 12 and 13, 2025, this hidden war burst into the open. Israel launched major overt attacks on Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure, targeting facilities long suspected of advancing Iran's nuclear program. The strikes were unprecedented in their scale and precision, signaling a dramatic escalation and a willingness to risk all-out war. In a rare move, Israel claimed responsibility for the attacks. Officials declared that the strikes had set back Iran's nuclear ambitions by 2 to 3 years and eliminated several high-ranking Iranian commanders. The message was clear: Israel would not tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran, and it was prepared to act decisively. Iran's response was swift and massive. Over 1,000 drones and missiles were launched toward Israeli territory, aiming to overwhelm Israel's defenses and inflict heavy damage. Yet, Israel's advanced air defense systems, including the Iron Dome and Arrow, intercepted nearly all incoming threats, preventing widespread destruction. The psychological impact on both societies was profound. Israeli cities went on high alert, with civilians seeking shelter and bracing for further attacks. In Iran, the toll was devastating. Over 400 killed and thousands injured, overwhelming hospitals and emergency services. The attacks did not just cripple military sites, they also sowed fear and chaos in civilian areas. Families fled their homes, neighborhoods were left in ruins, and the sense of insecurity spread rapidly through Iranian cities. Iranian leaders appeared on national television, vowing fierce retaliation. They threatened to activate their vast network of regional proxies, including Hezbollah and militias in Iraq and Syria, raising fears of a wider regional conflict. This initial wave of violence marked only the beginning. The region braced for further escalation, as tensions soared and the risk of a broader war loomed larger than ever. As the world watched anxiously, all eyes turned to Washington. The United States faced mounting pressure to respond, knowing that its next move could determine the fate of the entire Middle East. The conflict escalated dramatically on June 21, 2025, as tensions that had been simmering for months finally erupted into open confrontation. The world watched in disbelief as the situation in the Middle East spiraled out of control, with Tehran's skyline lit up by distant explosions and the wail of sirens echoing through the night. That night, the United States made a fateful decision: to intervene directly in the conflict. Across the U.S., military forces were mobilized with unprecedented speed, and the Pentagon became the nerve center of a massive operation. In a meticulously coordinated assault known as Operation Rising Lion, the U.S. unleashed a series of powerful airstrikes targeting Iran's most critical nuclear facilities, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. The strikes were designed to cripple Iran's nuclear capabilities and send a clear message to the world. President Trump addressed the nation from the White House, announcing the strikes and declaring them a decisive blow to Iran's nuclear ambitions. He emphasized that the operation was necessary to protect global security and prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. The operation featured B-2 stealth bombers flying under the cover of darkness, dropping precision-guided, bunker-busting bombs on fortified underground targets. The world's most advanced aircraft were deployed to ensure maximum impact with minimal warning. Simultaneously, U.S. Navy submarines lurking in the Persian Gulf launched volleys of Tomahawk cruise missiles, their trails lighting up the night sky as they streaked toward their targets deep inside Iran. The White House framed the attack as a last resort, insisting it was necessary to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran and to uphold international security agreements. Officials stressed that all diplomatic avenues had been exhausted. Around the globe, reactions were swift and divided. Some allies voiced support for the U.S. action, while others condemned it as reckless and dangerous. Protests erupted outside embassies, and world leaders scrambled to respond to the rapidly unfolding crisis. In Tehran, Iranian officials condemned the strikes as an unprovoked act of war. Lawmakers in parliament erupted in anger, vowing swift retaliation and denouncing the U.S. for violating Iran's sovereignty. Iran's leaders declared that their nuclear program would not be halted by force. Instead, they promised to rebuild with renewed determination, rallying the nation around a message of resistance and defiance. Iranian state media reported that the targeted sites had been evacuated in time, minimizing casualties. Emergency vehicles rushed to the scene, and authorities assured the public that the situation was under control. Officials insisted that no radioactive leaks had occurred, and hazmat teams were deployed as a precaution. The Iranian Red Crescent provided aid to those affected, while the world anxiously awaited further updates. In a chilling escalation, Iran declared that all American assets in the region were now considered legitimate targets. Revolutionary Guard units mobilized, and military parades showcased Iran's missile arsenal, signaling a dangerous new phase in the conflict. The U.S. intervention had transformed what was once a regional standoff into a full-blown global crisis. News outlets around the world flashed urgent headlines, and millions watched events unfold in real time. As curfews were imposed and world leaders held emergency meetings, the world braced for what might come next, uncertain and fearful of the consequences that now seemed inevitable. Amidst the escalating conflict, a rumor spread. China is secretly supplying Iran with advanced weaponry. The theory suggests Beijing is playing a double game, publicly calling for peace while covertly arming Tehran to undermine the U.S. and its allies. Proponents claim China could be providing missiles, drones, or air defense systems through clandestine channels. The logic: a prolonged Middle East war would distract America from the Indo-Pacific, serving China's strategic interests. This narrative fits existing anxieties about China's global ambitions and the idea of a new Cold War. But compelling stories aren't always true. These claims demand careful scrutiny. When we look for facts, the story of China secretly arming Iran quickly unravels. No credible news outlet or intelligence agency has produced evidence of Chinese weapons shipments to Iran. Experts agree. It's highly unlikely China would risk such a move, which would invite direct confrontation with the U.S. China's foreign policy prioritizes stability and economic growth, not military adventurism. In today's world of satellite surveillance and intelligence sharing, a secret arms pipeline would be nearly impossible to hide. The lack of evidence suggests this rumor is more fiction than fact. Understand China's real role, look at its actions, not rumors. Beijing's response has been consistent: calls for calm, de-escalation, and diplomacy. China's main concern is economic, specifically securing its vital oil imports from Iran. War threatens China's energy security and billions in investments, including a 25-year strategic partnership with Tehran. China has also worked to build its reputation as a regional mediator, brokering the Iran-Saudi Arabia deal in 2023. The current conflict undermines these efforts and threatens to push the region back into Washington's orbit. China's strategy is clear: protect its economic interests and diplomatic influence by promoting stability, not chaos. Secretly arming Iran would run counter to everything China has worked for in the region. The conflict's impact extends far beyond the Middle East, shaking the global economy and alliances. Iran's threats to close the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point for 20% of the world's oil, have sent energy markets into turmoil. Even a brief disruption could spike oil prices, trigger inflation, and slow economic growth worldwide. The crisis is also testing alliances, with Iran activating its network of proxies and the US reaffirming commitments to regional partners. Russia has warned the US against further intervention, adding another layer of superpower tension. Nations are divided in their responses, making a unified international approach difficult. The risk of miscalculation or unintended escalation is dangerously high. The world is watching, hoping to avoid a global economic and security disaster. As the conflict intensifies, the international community is urgently calling for de-escalation and diplomacy. The United Nations and major European powers are pushing for a ceasefire and renewed talks, fearing a humanitarian disaster and the collapse of nuclear negotiations. Regional players like Turkey and Russia have offered to mediate, while others condemn US airstrikes or evacuate their citizens. Practical safety measures are underway. Embassies are evacuating staff and countries are helping their nationals leave the region. In Israel, daily life is disrupted as the government imposes emergency measures. These actions underscore the immediate danger faced by millions in the conflict zone. The Middle East stands at a crossroads, caught in a cycle of attack and retaliation involving Israel, Iran, and the United States. Rumors of China arming Iran have been debunked. Beijing's real focus is on diplomacy and protecting its economic interests. The conflict threatens global stability, risking a wider war and economic turmoil if oil supplies are disrupted. The only path to peace is through dialogue and restraint, not escalation. The next steps are uncertain. Iran may retaliate, or diplomatic pressure could open a path to negotiations. The world is watching, hoping reason prevails over retribution. The choices made now will determine whether the region descends further into war or finds a fragile peace. The stakes could not be higher.